Welcome back. This is a supplemental episode that will be hosted over in YouTube for my podcast episode 32, where I'm diving into design limitations, which is a multi-episode series where the more you're going to know about the limitations that already exist out there before you even begin designing your project is the most powerful position to be in. So in episode 32 of the podcast, I guess we'll call this episode 32.1, is designed to supplement episode 32, which was where we're beginning the multi-episode series of design limitations, and I dove into zoning and the municipal code. And what I thought I'd try to do for you today is actually show you what I was talking about, because it's a little bit hard to follow, and maybe I can help you connect the dots. So what I've done, I've picked a random city and a random state, and I've done some research behind the scenes for this presentation so that we're not on this call for, hours. And it does take some time to figure this out. But if you live in the city that you're planning to build in, it's probably a little bit easier for you because you're familiar with your community or city. So I picked Kansas City, Kansas. I've never been there. Just quickly researched what are some of the most popular or desirable areas in Kansas City, and I came up with one of them called Waldo, which is a neighborhood. I think it's in the southern part of Kansas City, somewhere I think down over, it's on the 74th Street block. And it's an existing home that perhaps we want to remodel someday. And everything that we're going to be looking at today is all publicly available information. So there's no secrets here. All of this is out there for anybody to see. I just happen to know how to get in there and figure out what are my parameters. What are the basic parameters even that I have to work with so that I can go ahead and plan my remodel and expansion of my project. Now, keep in mind that when we're talking about researching the zoning of a property, it's likely relative to either a large scale remodel and addition and expansion and even replacing the facade of the home, all the way to projects where you're planning to build a new home or demolish an existing home and build a new home. So if you're doing a kitchen remodel or a bathroom remodel, this is a little overkill for you. But this one it was kind of an interesting process. I don't know Kansas City. I don't know their planning and building departments there. And I have to say, I was pretty impressed. They have quite a thorough record. So here's Kansas City, if you can see it. And we're going to go, first thing I did is I went to right up here, I went to the Kansas City Development Process Guide. So all I did is I just went to the city of Kansas City, Missouri, and went to the city and planning and development departments and wanted to start learning about what I can do on my property. And as you can see right on here, and many cities are the same way, is they say, before obtaining permits and approvals, what is my property zoning? So understanding your zoning is the very first thing that you want to do, which I mentioned in the podcast. So what I did is I clicked on this Parcel viewer, and that is where most cities, in fact, maybe all cities have this. And if you click on this, we end up looking at a sheet like this or a page like this, which is a subject parcel that I just randomly picked. And I picked a larger parcel on a corner lot, and I want to learn more about this piece of property. Perhaps I want to buy this property. Maybe it's a property that's on the market, that's for sale. I'd like to learn as much as possible before I put in an offer. Or maybe it's a home, maybe it's my home that I already own that I want to remodel, or maybe it's a nice sized lot in a really good location, but the home is not in the greatest condition. I just want to demolish it and rebuild it. So again, this research is for projects that are of the larger size. So this project is on 715 West 74th Street in Kansas City, Missouri, in that Waldo neighborhood like I talked about. And some of the things that we care about is the zoning. And if this particular site of Kansas City, it's really wonderful, actually. They give you all of the data. Much of it we don't need, but you can see right here that they have zoning R6. Now, and you can also see that it's in blue, so I can click on that and it will take me to the municipal code I was talking about in the previous podcast episode and with the details of the zoning of R6. So R meaning residential, 6, in this particular city, it's a classification, the zoning, the R zoning. It doesn't have anything to do, as far as I can tell, with the size of the lot, because the lot, if you can see down here, is actually 19,000 square feet. So it's not 6,000 square feet like I mentioned earlier, but each city does it a little bit differently. So this gives you a sense. It's a 20,000 square foot lot almost. It's about almost a half acre. It's really actually a nice piece of property. So there's the zoning that shows here. There's also an interesting thing here, which some cities don't have, is it talks about what neighborhood and homeowner associations it's in. And this is important because you're going to want to understand what other rules lurk about that are tied to your homeowners association. We'll look at that in a minute. So this is what a parcel map can look like in this particular city, and they're very similar in others. So the next thing that we're going to want to do is understand what this R6 means. So if I click on the R6, it brings me to the Kansas City Municipal Code. Now, I want you to understand something here is if you look up here, library.municode.com, it seems that all of the cities, or not all, I should say, but most of the cities in the United States use a very similar, if not exact, same system. It must be, I think it's a third-party service that all the cities subscribe to where they can build their municipal code. And remember, the municipal code is all of the rules and regulations for managing a city, and within that, the zoning districts, and the zoning districts have their own set of rules for each zone. So zoning could be residential, it could be commercial, it could be industrial. There's different classifications of zoning, and then within each of those headings, there are different subclasses. So this pushed me here, and right here you can see it says base zoning districts. And if I keep clicking through, you'll see residential districts, the districts, the purpose, the uses, the residential building types, development options, lot and building standards. So let's go to the districts, and you can see over here on this side, it pulls up all of the districts, all the residential districts. The city's residential zoning districts are listed below, and they have the map symbol. R6 is what we were looking at. Residential 6 is what we're interested today. And we can keep scrolling down and learn more about the purpose and the uses and so on. And then we can get down to the residential districts use table. Now, what use, when we use the word use is what type of buildings, what type of businesses maybe, what type of uses are allowed on this particular property. So in our, you can see all of the different zonings categories here. You can see that under the use category, we have residential, we have household living. The P means that's what's permitted. A nursing home is actually allowed, but S means a special use permit. You could also have bicycle sharing facilities. A college university could be located. It looks like it's permitted with a special use permit. It looks like daycares, families up to 10, groups up to 20 under the daycare category. And you could build a park in an arsenal. You could have schools and so on. So this is what's allowed in your district that you're looking at. And for the most part, we're talking about the residential. Fortunately, there's no industrial allowed. And there's some other things that may apply, likely not. And this is what we're talking about today, is what type of use is available on your lot, which is good for you to know before you start digging into it. You also are allowed to put in the city of Kansas City a detached house, a zero lot line house, which is interesting to know, a cottage house, and then they even allow attached houses on corner lots. So in our particular use case scenario here, we do have a corner lot. So we could have an attached house on this lot. We could even have a 2-unit house on this corner lot. So people purchasing properties or wanting to expand them or redevelop them, this is your first step to understand what's allowed on the property. And then we can just keep drilling down. We have a detached house, and these are all the classifications that we just looked at a second ago. Here's what a 2-unit house looks like. And then we get down into more stuff that we care about. And here we go. So we are in an R6 zoning. So it looks like it is related to the square footage of lot. The minimum lot area square footage is 6,000 square feet. And the minimum lot area per unit, meaning how many houses is 6,000 square feet. The minimum lot width is 50. Let's go to the front setback. So this is one of the first things you want to learn is how far can you build up to your property line? And the minimum is a percentage of the lot depth. So in your case, if this lot is 100 feet deep, let's say, that means that you have to have a 25-foot front yard setback, 25% of the depth of the lot. The minimum garage, which would be, assuming this is a separate structure, is the same requirement. And the maximum required setback is 30 feet. So the rear setback, it's the same rule. So in the R6, we need to have a 25% minimum. And then they have a maximum, which I would flag this myself of what they mean by maximum. Does that mean I can't have a bigger maximum setback on the front and the back? That I've never seen this before. So I would like to learn a little bit more about that. So that was an example of writing down a question when you go to visit with the planner. And then you have the side setbacks. In this city, they do the same thing. They have a percentage of the lot width. So if you have a 50-foot lot, which is really narrow, you're only going to have a 10% or 5-foot side yard setback on each side. And here we go with that maximum again. And then here's something interesting to know. If you live on a corner lot, which this particular property is a corner lot, you actually have to have a greater setback on the side yard on a corner lot. Because if you think about it, it's really kind of like another front. So they don't want buildings crammed right up against the street. And then they have the maximum height limitation, which is very common in most jurisdictions, is to have a maximum height. Now, understanding how they measure the height, the next level to drill down, and we're not going to do that today, but is that to the peak of the roof? Is that to the peak of the wall where the slope begins? Is it midway? I've seen it done in different ways. So that's another flag for your planner when you talk with them is, what do you mean by maximum height? Height to what? Now, in Kansas City, I have not found residential design review guidelines. At the end of this episode, we're going to look at another city that has that, and that's going to help us understand another level of parameters that may be lurking about. Now, the rest of this screen is stuff unrelated to this project. Open space, this is all under open space development, and so on. So we don't care about any of this stuff. So those are like the really basics of what's allowed on the property. So nowhere in Kansas City have I found that they have a limitation of the amount of square footage, the amount of lot coverage. It might exist. I've spent quite a bit of time trying to find it. So that's another question I have for the city. If I were doing research for a client, I would assemble all of my questions, and I could not find a residential development guide easy enough. So therefore I would want to call and make an appointment with a planner. And again, if I was doing research for a client, I'd probably just do a Zoom call and can basically build a report for a client. And by the way, this is a service that I'll be providing, doing a property evaluation, property assessment, report for people that don't have the time to sit here and figure all this out, because I can probably drill through it a lot faster than somebody who never has. But keep in mind, this is what a lot of architects and design professionals do. Is exactly what I'm doing is they're starting with the basics, understanding setbacks and heights, and then they'll keep drilling down and drilling down. Now, another thing we're going to want to look at, let's go back to this parcel map here. And you remember I pulled up right here, neighborhood and homeowners associations. And I want you to be really careful here because I clicked on it. And sure enough, they have something called the South Kansas City Alliance, which I don't know what that is. And they call it a partner. And then they have the Ward Parkway Homes Association. And that to me tells me that's a homeowners association. Now, what I did is I went ahead and looked that up, and this is what I came up with. Sorry about that. So this is the Ward Parkway Homes Association. And so this is actually a homeowners association, it appears to be. And I spent some time on this website looking for any type of design guidelines. So homeowners associations often have architectural review committees, architectural review processes, and they have other rules that you may not realize that you should look into. Now, I couldn't find anything on their association, but I did find somewhere where it said that it's not publicly available. So if you're thinking about buying into this community or remodeling an existing home, that would be the next step I would do, is look to see what else is out there that's lurking about. And I found another, I think it's here, I found one called Ward Park Place. It's not the same association. It's in Missouri, but it's somewhere else. But I just wanted to show you this today because this is an example of a recorded document at this particular location in this particular homeowners association. And this goes back, sometimes these go back way back, but this one was 1999. And they have, as you scroll down, they start to bring in rules about additions to existing properties, and they even get down here and they start talking about architectural review committees. This is, sometimes they're called the CC&Rs, but you'll want to find the documentation within the association to make sure that there's no rules and regulations. So you can see here construction improvements and use of lots, and they have rules and regulations, even what type of roofing is allowed and not allowed. They have a minimum floor space, square footage. They talk about the exterior paints, building lines, fences, utilities. They have all of these rules and regulations. Right here is where architectural control is. Now, this is nothing compared to a lot of developments. If you go into a newer development, you're buying an empty lot in this beautiful new up and coming development, guarantee you're going to have architectural review guidelines that are 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 pages that will govern how your home is going to look, feel, taste, everything. So this is an example in somewhere in Missouri. It's called the Ward Park Place of Raymore, Missouri, and these are their declaration of managing their association. So that is one thing I want you to be aware of. Now, there's another thing in the city governments, and they're called overlays. And I mentioned this in the podcast episode, and I mentioned this in the book as well. And I got caught on this in a project myself. And what this is overlays. We're back to Kansas City, Missouri. And now I know there's Kansas City, Missouri, and Kansas City, Kansas. No, I already knew that, but I got lost a little bit on the internet for a minute. But they're called overlays. And what this is it's literally that. There's the baseline rules and regulations for city development standards, but then they put overlays over the top of certain neighborhoods. Sometimes it's an association, but it's usually certain neighborhoods, and it's for a variety of reasons. It could be for historic districts, right? In Kansas City, by the way, I'm starting to like Kansas City. There's a lot of beautiful buildings, and communities, and I really am starting to like it. But just for an example, I wanted to show you what an overlay looks like. So there's a community called, I think I went with the Warnell Homestead Homes Association. And I read through this. It was interesting. This was an old original ranch, I believe, from days back. And over the years, it's been subdivided. That's, I think, why they call it the Warnell Homestead. And what they've done is they create an association. They even have separate subdivisions within the associations. And they have what they call the Warnell Homestead Overlay District. And this is actually recorded, I think, with the county and the city. And what they do is they govern what can be built, how it will look, the size, shape, and everything. And here is the document that they have. And it tells you, an intro about the community. It tells you the purpose of why they're doing this overlay district. And it gets into permitting, lot and building standards. They have specific heights. Now here it says it shall be the same as the base zoning district. However, it's measured and limitations shall be regulated differently in the UHO district as follows. And they have all their rules and regulations. Here you can see they call it other lot and building standards. And here we go. They've got all these different criteria. They're specific to this that override the baseline regulations that the city planning department has come up with years ago. So my point is, when you're sitting with a planner, when you're thinking about building a new custom home, whether it's a new development or an existing neighborhood, be aware of, you start with the zoning, you start with the regulations for the zoning, you research the associations, you research any potential overlay districts, which could be the historic district or other type of reasons that their overlays exist. And you can see that we're getting into some pretty good details here. For example, this is just an example, minimum attached front-loaded garage setback. What does that mean? Well, 4 feet from the balance of the front plane of the house as constructed and as defined for setback purposes, exclusive of porches, bay windows, or other allowed encroachments. So what they're saying is they don't want the garage flush with the face of the home. They want I think they want it set back. Yeah, garage setback. They want it set back from the face of the home so that it creates character and you don't get that big blank wall when the garage is front loaded, to the house, or with the design of the house, the garage being front loaded right on the front of the lot. So these are just some examples. And that's actually related to the side setback of an abutting street. Here's the front setback. And it looks like it might be the same. Yeah, it looks like it's the same regulations. So we don't need to go into all these details, but you can see that this has been well thought out specifically for the neighborhood, and that you need to know that. And sometimes you want to know this before you buy into a neighborhood, because you'll have to be careful, because some developments have become very restrictive in what you can build. Sometimes you'll go into these custom home developments and you kind of get the sense that all the homes, they sort of look the same. Well, there's a reason for that. And some people like that, some people don't like that. But the overriding goal of these overlays, the overriding goal of all of these regulations, the zoning, is to protect the integrity of the neighborhoods so that you don't end up with that, like I mentioned in the podcast episode, this big, like, pink palace, built next door to you. I had that personally happen to me, and it was not very attractive, and it certainly did not help the values of the property. So that is what I wanted to bring to your attention, is some of these key things. Now, there's a lot of cities that have what they call design review guidelines, or a design review handbook that goes along with the zoning regulations and also has even more rules in it. So that's the next question you ask your county planner when you go in to visit with them is, do you have a design guideline, handbook? Do you have any other regulations that I need to be aware of besides the zoning, besides the overlays, besides what I need to know about my association?" And see what their answer is. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to hop over to a different city, one that I am familiar with, that I've worked in for many, many years. And we're going to just touch on that real quick so that you can get a sense of what I'm talking about. So there's a city in Northern California called Saratoga, California. They have, it's all the same type of system. Maybe the numbers or the nomenclature is a little bit different, but you can see here's the city of Saratoga, California. It's right there in Silicon Valley, where all of the high-tech companies are located. It's where I'm originally from. You can see that this is their planning department website. It looks different than Kansas City, but it's all the same information, and sometimes even organized in the same third-party solutions like I talked about, which was that Muni Code website. So planning division, the planning department, is the one that creates all these rules, governs all. This is not the building department. The building department is all about structure, safety, building code, and whatnot. Planning department is specifically about the look of your home, the mass, the scale, and all of that is controlled by the rules of the setbacks and the height limitations and the second floor setbacks. And that's how they kind of constrain your project so that you don't get out of control. Now, a lot of cities don't start to get into the paint colors and that kind of stuff unless you're in a planned unit development. But here you can see they've got some general information, and then they've got the city code. So if I click on the city, watch what happens when I click on the city code. It look familiar? It's the same website system that Kansas City uses. So as a design professional, they're really accustomed to navigating all of this to find out the information they need. We're not going to dig too deep into City of Saratoga because we've already done that. But what I did want to show you is as you start to dig deep into some of these things, you'll see like right here, floor area, lot coverage, and setbacks. So I think when I click on that, I came up with, well, let's go back and click on it and see what I come up with. Okay. So this is a specific part of the Muni Code where they talk about site coverage, site frontage, width and depth, and so on. But what I did find was this is, in this case, it's R1 10,000. So you remember in Kansas City, it was R6, which is 6,000 square feet. These are in Saratoga. This is an R1 10,000, which means it's governing all of the properties between a certain range up to 10,000 square feet. So the other zoning might be before this R, 9,000 or 8,000. I'd have to go back and check. It doesn't matter. This particular zoning shows you that the front setback is 25 feet, the side is 10, the second floor is 15. So notice that. So when you build a 2-story home in Saratoga, the second story has to jet in a little bit. And why is that? Well, it's because they don't want to have big boxes built. They want to respect the neighbors, and they want more architectural interest to shape the community. And I think it's a good idea. The rear, same rules apply. The first floor is 25 feet. The second floor is 35 feet. Hope you guys can see this on the screen. And then here we go again with the corner lots, different requirements. Now, this is one that we didn't see in Kansas City, but lot coverage maximum. So 60% of net site area. Now, see the little asterisk here. Net site area is something to reconcile with because it means after deducting slope percentage. So I think I may have mentioned this in previous episodes, but if a lot is sloped, you reduce the amount of net site area because they want to regulate how high or massive these structures look on a hillside. So keep that in mind. And there's other things that will affect net site area. Sometimes in some cities, easements where somebody else, like a utility company, has a right of way to your property, Sometimes that can affect net site area. Sometimes it doesn't. So you'd have to look into that. But here's where you just really start to get in the weeds. And I don't want to do that to you today. But so look at this. So if you have a net site area of 5,001 square feet to 10,000 square feet, you can build a 2,400 square foot plus 2,400 square foot house plus 160 square feet per 1,000 over 5,000 square feet. So if you have a 6,000 square foot lot, you can build 2,400 plus 160. Now, I want you to keep one thing in mind also here is that what does 2,400 square foot mean? Does that just mean the living area? Does that mean the living area and the garage included? Some cities include it all together, some cities don't. So we'd have to dig into the city of Saratoga, but I'm pretty sure the floor area allowance means the habitable area, and meaning the conditioned space, sort of. So floor area calculations can get really, really tricky because cities will count certain segments of a building. Like, for example, when you walk in your front door and you have this nice, big, tall ceiling foyer that's, we'll say it's 20 feet tall with the big grand chandelier and everything and the staircase going up. Well, a lot of cities count that floor area directly below that high ceiling double because it's, if you have a 200 square foot entry to your home, you're going to have to count it as 400 square feet because if you think about it, that's contributing to the mass and scale of the property. So they've got it all figured out. It's kind of like the IRS. There's really no way around it. They kind of have it all figured out. So here's another thing. Did you know, and this is what I like about the city of Saratoga, the net site area for determining floor area is further reduced if your lot has a 10% or greater average slope. So here they go with their calculations. This is a big one. A lot of people miss this and then go in and submit to the planning department after spending months and thousands of dollars on plans, and they have a 12% slope or they have a 25% slope and didn't know that they had to reduce the allowable floor area based on that by a certain calculated percentage. This is the one that gets missed quite a bit. And that's not the end of it, but there's more and more. So you can see that the city of Saratoga has come up with a little sheet on how to explain some of the really critical aspects of a project. So that's the next thing you want to add to your list is, do you have any documentation that is specific to my lot size? And going back to the Kansas City example of the R6, here we are in Saratoga, the R1, 10,000. Do you have any specific information, Mr. or Mrs. Planning person standing behind the counter, that is specific to my zoning district that's important to me that will regulate the size and scale of my home? That's a great question to ask. Now, there's one more thing I wanted to show you before we wrap this episode up. The city of Saratoga calls it Single Family Residential Design Review Handbook. Now, this is a really nice thing they've done, probably because they got tired of people submitting projects, that didn't comply to all the rules and regulations. The city of Saratoga is very particular about what they allow. They're trying to maintain a certain look and feel of their community dating back to the old orchard days of Silicon Valley that I grew up in. And it's becoming harder and harder for them to do that because of the lack of land and the pressure for housing and so on. But that's another story. But here we go with a really nice document. Here they're talking about mass, height, scale, and proportion, streetscape, two-story structure. All of this stuff is really helpful for a person to study as they're dreaming about their new home, or an architect, or maybe an aspiring design professional that's working within an architectural office that's learning all this stuff. And that's what I'm finding out with this podcast and the book. I'm finding that more and more design contractors, design professionals, up and coming design professional. I mean, many seasoned architects already know all this stuff, but the new ones coming in don't necessarily know all these little ins and outs and little things you can maze around in. And that's what I'm helping. Turns out that's who I'm helping too. So you can see that the city of Saratoga goes through, it talks about good and bad and all of the different things that they like to see in their project. And that's kind of my last point for you today is what you want to do in a project for a single family residential new home or large remodel project is the more you understand and appreciate the rules and regulations of your city planning department and respect them by incorporating those into your design and plans, it's going to be a lot easier on you when it comes to submit for approval. And keep in mind, during my episode, my podcast episode, if you missed that, I'll just reiterate it right here. There are steps to take, prudent steps to take to smooth out the process so that you don't get blindsided by a lot of this stuff. Number one, do your own due diligence, do your own research like we just did today. Number two, make sure that your design professionals are on board too with all of this and ask some open-ended questions like, can you tell me more about how many square feet I can have in my home? Can you tell me about the height limitations? Can you tell me about if there's any overlay districts in my neighborhood? And, a design professional will probably know that, or they may not have researched it yet, but they know they need to do that. And they'll provide you the answers that hopefully are right. So the next thing is make an appointment, go into the planning department, talk with a city planner. They seem to be really open to helping because they can't stand it when projects come in that are just not even close to considering all the rules and regulations. So they usually help you, and you'll get somebody behind the counter that could be an associate planner, or it could be a senior planner, or it could be the head of the department. You don't know. Sometimes they just rotate on the counter work. And if you get an associate planner, or frankly, if you get any of them, when you start asking the questions, how big of a home can I have? How high can it be? Are there any other regulations that I need to know about? Make sure that they're able to back that up with the actual municipal code ordinances that are documented. So you may want to ask, could you show me that? Because a lot of times they'll just whip it out. They'll whip out their computer, or sometimes they have their manuals right there with them at the counter, and they'll be able to confirm with you what maybe you already thought or that you didn't know. Then you have this all banked when you start talking with your architect about planning your project. You can be asking intelligent questions. And if you've worked with an architect or working with an architect that is familiar with your community, so like in the Kansas City project, if you're in the Waldo neighborhood of Kansas City, you might ask questions. Are you familiar with working with this, with Kansas City in general? Have you ever worked in the Waldo area or the Overland Park area or the adjacent areas in my neighborhood? And you're going to hopefully hear yes, because if they know people in the planning departments, if they know their processes and procedures, gosh, it's going to make a huge difference. Then when your architect has done their due diligence, and so have you, and between the two of you, you've put the heads together and made sure that you're on the right track, and you've gone through design step 1, schematic design, which I talked back in a few episodes. I went through all the steps of design. You can take your preliminary drawings and go in, make another appointment with the planning department, and still an informal process. Sometimes they have a formal pre-submittal process as well. I did a project in Napa County, and they had a very formal pre-submittal process. It costs money. But the thing is you're in a much better position because they will review the plans, and they actually will take accountability in that process when you start paying money, and they'll provide you feedback for all kinds of things that I haven't even mentioned today, such as the right-of-way and public works and utilities and all the other things that we talked about today. And you're now of positioning yourself. You've enlightened yourself, and you're starting to empower yourself with all of this information. So you're going to protect your experience, right? As you get down the road. There is nothing worse than going through all of the design. I mean, the complete design process, submitting to the planning department, and they're going, what are you thinking? You can't even do this. It's 45 feet tall. It can't be higher than 35 feet tall. Oh, well, some people will think they can just go in and circumvent the rules, or the infamous word file for a variance, which is a nightmare usually in most cities especially in the more established cities, when you try to file a variance or apply for a variance, it's a nightmare. I mean, you're talking about public hearings and cost and time delay. So that is the worst case scenario, where you've spent 10, 20, 30, 50, $100,000 on plans and they have to be redesigned. All of a sudden your roof pitch is this instead of this. All of a sudden your ceilings are 8 feet instead of 10 feet. I mean, there's some pretty good horror stories out there. So that is the whole objective of episode 32 and this YouTube supplemental, is I just wanted you to see visually what I'm talking about here. And you can do your own little research to explore if you want. Now you know. Or if you want to just know that has to be done, you can ask your architect. Or if you want a consultant to help you early stage, that's like something that somebody like myself can help you with. Or you could just retain an architect, and sometimes a contractor can help you with this too, but you can hire them to do your property evaluation and research before you buy the property, or before you spend $1 design work. You can hire people to do that, and you can start learning a lot. So that's what I have for you today on this episode. And this was kind of fun doing the screen share. I hope it worked. I hope you can see the screen. We're going to just now keep going into the design limitations series. And we'll be getting into the next episode. And I think I'm going to dive into floor area ratio and maybe a little bit more on zoning in the next episode. So I want to thank you for joining. I'm Bill Reed, your home building coach. Enlighten, empower, and protect. We'll see you in the next one.